Rick, you're the CEO of Alto, the UK's number one CRM for estate agents. For those who don't know, give us the quick elevator pitch. What is Alto and what problem are you solving in the property market?
Thanks for having me, Cormac. It's a pleasure to speak to you. So, Alto is, as you said, it's the UK's number one CRM for estate agents. Um, More estate agents run their businesses on Alto than any other platform, and we cover the entire workflow of an estate agent's day to day. So it's sales, it's lettings, it's property management, it's client accounting, it's compliance, it's reporting, all in one system. And what that means in practice is estate agents can manage every part of their business without needing to juggle multiple tools or re-entering the same data over and over again. And that saves time, it reduces errors, and it gives them more headroom to focus on growth. We actually call it the last CRM that you'll ever need because Alto does it all. And we keep investing to make sure that it keeps pace with the industry. You know, agents don't want to existing systems out and replace them every few years. Alto grows with them, and it's the platform that they can rely on for the long term. So it is the last CRM they'll ever need.
Nice. And I vouch for it. So anyone that doesn't know, I used Alto previously. So yeah, I definitely vouch for it. So, okay, what drew you first into the property tech and estate agency sector?
What drew me into PropTech and the estate agency sector? Yeah, good question. Well, I come from a pretty ordinary background, really. My dad's a builder. My mum's a teaching assistant. But I grew up around property, clearly more on the practical side than the boardroom side. But yeah, it was sort of part of my day to day. I then went to study architecture. Because from my perspective, I was reasonably ambitious, and it felt like that was the pinnacle of the sector that I knew. The reality, of course, was that it was far less glamorous, and I found myself craving a bit more creativity and pace. That ultimately led me to London, first at a global design firm, and then moved across into a senior role at a house builder. A job which I'm fair to say now that I was massively underqualified for at the time, but I've always been one to say yes to things. And whilst I was there, I sort of saw how outdated the sales process was. There's lots of paperwork. There's lots of duplicated data. The communication is quite slow, and I was just sort of crying out for tech. So that realization pulled me into PropTech. I founded a business in 2017 called Yorkies, which was a sales progression transaction management platform. And that grew quite quickly, and then it was acquired by Zoopla in 2021. So that's a sort of potted history of my journey.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. And now you're first time CEO at just 34. So what are some of the challenges stepping into that leadership role for the first time?
Yeah, so, well, I mean, first time founder at this scale, clearly. I was founder and CEO at Yorkies from startup to where we got it.
Mm.
But the main differences are, as a founder, you live on adrenaline and instinct, right? You're pivoting constantly. You're in every detail, and you just will the business forward through sheer energy, I suppose. And then as a CEO, especially at scale, you need new muscles, you need structure, you need patience, you need discipline. And so, one of the hardest adjustments was just stepping back from doing everything myself and instead trying to focus on creating the environment where others can do their best work. If you can create cohesion between the people that you've hired to do their jobs, then you won't go too far wrong. The other lesson on top of that is around execution discipline. You can't just set a strategy and expect people to believe it. You have to prove it. We talk a lot about this concept called our say-do ratio, which is basically delivering on what you said consistently. And over time, belief builds. And so I use the phrase a lot, go slow to go fast. So if you take the time to land strategy deeply, if you get alignment and then you accelerate, that's where you'll see that it really lands. And that's been one of the biggest shifts for me personally.
Nice. Yeah, I like that. I like that. Yeah, I use that throughout stuff that I do in everything. Like, just say what you do, and then it constantly builds. Yeah, okay, I agree. So, was there a particular moment early on where you saw Alto could genuinely transform how agencies work?
Well, I mean, Alto's been around for a long time, right? And ultimately, it was part of a group that with its sister businesses, Zoopla and Home Track. Um, and the thesis there of having all these businesses under one roof was, they all touch part of the property transaction in some shape or form. How do we make them better than the sum of their parts? And what we found is that that's a bit more difficult than first imagined. So what we've done and what's led me to my role is, as we've separated these businesses out, because they do just have very different go-to-market strategies, they've got different pricing methodologies, they've got a whole bunch of different dynamics in their customer bases and how their products work. And so what I saw was, as we've separated Alto out from the group structure, we've really gone back to basics, let's focus exclusively on the customer. Let's roll out new language across our business that we call jobs of work, which is focused on these sort of pockets of functionality that exists within the product that do a particular job for an agent, and what an agent hires us to do. And, there's 47 of them in Alto. And what we're just relentlessly focused on is, how can we show demonstrable value in terms of efficiency across all of those jobs of work? So how do we make the click count go down? How do we make the time spent on task go down? How do we weave in automation to take these heavy lift administrative tasks away? So what I saw was a business that, distracted's not the right word, but wasn't focusing on doing the basics. And then as we've come in, we've really got back under the skin of what our customers really hire us for. And that's why we call our strategy this year Back to Core.
Okay, yeah, nice. So, with that go to market, going back to the core, how does that actually look on the channel side? Is it mostly inbound, outbound referrals?
Yeah, you mean how do we win customers?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's a mix. Referrals are incredibly powerful in this industry. Agents talk, they compare notes. If you deliver real value, word spreads quite fast, which is a good thing and a bad thing, right? That said, we balance inbound marketing, outbound sales, a growing number of partnerships. Integrations often become the sort of entry point, and when an agent sees Alto working seamlessly with the tools that they already use, that sort of conversation flows quite naturally. So it's a mix, but increasingly we're becoming more reliant on partnerships.
Okay, nice. And then with estate agents, what part of the buyer journey is the hardest to influence?
What part of the buyer journey is the hardest to influence? Trust, I think. Agents have, and you'll know this, Cormac, that they've got a very low bar for BS.
Yeah.
They've heard every sales pitch, they've seen every shiny demo. These people are professional negotiators. So trying to sell to professional negotiators is clearly difficult. And the hardest thing is just cutting through the noise and showing them tangibly how you'll make their lives easier day to day. And like I say, that's why we frame everything around jobs of work, what agents are actually doing day to day, and how Alto saves them time, reduces errors, and ultimately helps them win more instructions. If you do that, you'll gain trust, and ultimately that is the hardest part of the sales cycle to influence.
Yeah, okay, okay. And then once you've got that trust, or I think with a lot of tech solutions, getting that long-term adoption can be a challenge. So you get across that first line, but then it's how do you ensure that they are using it and yeah, actually benefiting from all of the things that Alto offers.
Yeah, you're totally right. Closing's not even half the job, right? Adoption is where the real value is. So we've invested really heavily in onboarding and customer success, so that new customers can see the benefits really quickly. We obsess a lot over data. Um, our central infrastructure allows us to spot adoption patterns and flag accounts where usage is dropping so that we can intervene and support as early on as possible. And then culturally, it's important how you set up internally and how you frame the customer internally in your business, is really important because that leads to how we face into our customers and ultimately adoption. So we run monthly opco sessions with all of our leaders to sort of break down silos, to talk through issues through our jobs of work lens. We share best practices. We encourage as much as we can cross discipline use of tools. Look, that sort of part sounds quite internal, but like I say, it makes a huge difference externally because when team are aligned, customers feel it, and that's really important for long term adoption.
Nice. Okay. And that probably has led to all of that has led to your announcing your best H1 results ever, right? So 20
Yeah.
increase in recurring revenue. So what was the biggest driver if you had to put it on one thing?
Biggest driver. I mean, look, as it always is in business, it's always many things, but we've sort of touched on it. I think that the biggest driver has been focus. Like I say, we've already spoken about it, but since we've come away from the group setup, we've been able to give Alto the singular attention that it deserves. Customers are back at the center. We've fixed fundamentals. We're sharpening the roadmap around the things we've spoken about around efficiency, stability, ease of use. Um, and again, retention is the real engine. You can grow. It's a lot easier to grow if you're not leaking out the bottom, right? And when customers see improvements week after week, they stay longer with us and then they grow with us. But also, you need to invest in capability. So we've launched an AI labs team with a bunch of data engineers internally, and that's leading to new automation features and smarter insights that the agents feel in their daily workflows, all through the lens of creating efficiency through jobs of work. And so, look, yeah, it hasn't come from one big bet. It's, as it always is, it's the result of hundreds of small disciplined changes. But if you can create the right guardrails, those changes can really compound.
Mhm.
Uh, and so yeah, that's the crux of it, I'd say.
Yeah, nice. And is that the momentum scaling through to H2? I mean, we're in it now, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. Yes. Yeah, so far Q3 has been great on the same sort of trajectory. Look, it's about consistency, right? Keep that say-do ratio high, deliver what we said we're going to deliver, stay focused on the priorities that matter most, keep doubling down on the things we've already spoken about, ease of use, automation, partnerships. If Alto feels more valuable day to day to our customers, then we're going to win. And like I say, as we lean further into data, turning this rich transaction data set that we manage as a business into actionable insights for our agents, that'll only compound the benefits that they're getting from us day to day. And look, winning solves everything, right? Momentum comes from belief, and if our team and our customers keep seeing us deliver quarter after quarter, the growth follows quite naturally. So yeah, I'm hoping and I'm feeling pretty confident that H2 is going to be just as good.
Nice. Okay, cool. What's a learning or strategy or leadership misstep that you've learned since being a CEO at this scale?
One big learning came from how we approached Dupix, which is our second product. So Alto's our hero product. Dupix is our second product. And at one point, we explored winding it down, and we actually spoke to the market about winding it down. But we massively underestimated the loyalty of that customer base and the specific workflows that it served. And so, look, the lesson there is clear. Don't assume that you know better than the customer, and don't expect belief just because you've set a strategy. You have to prove it through consistent action over time.
Mhm.
And again, this all ladders back to emphasis on execution discipline, this say-do ratio again. But look, if you can create a cadence around one-way doors and two-way doors, you can maintain pace without constantly making it, or without making massive strategic missteps. Clearly you're always going to make mistakes, but if you as an organization are fast at identifying when it's a one-way door and you need to go slow to go fast and take your time and really understand the data before you make that decision because it's irreversible, versus a two-way door that you want to build a culture of empowering your organization to make those decisions autonomously. And if you can do that, then you won't go too far wrong, but you will always make some strategic errors, and then it's just how quickly you get up, learn, pivot, learn from them, and go again.
Yeah, bouncing back. Okay, okay. What's a belief about CRM or SaaS growth that you strongly disagree with?
A belief about CRM or SaaS that I strongly disagree with. We talk about this a lot, actually. Growth doesn't always come from adding more features, right? A lot of founders, particularly in the early stages, but even at scale up stage, think that you add more features, you'll fuel more growth. It's not always the case. Sometimes that is appropriate, but um, I often think that the opposite is more true than adding more features. The growth comes from making the basics faster, easier, more reliable. And if you nail the fundamentals, customers don't churn, and then you've got a reliable base to build on. So it's not always about feature pumping, I think is a myth.
Okay. Yeah, so scaling back can boost it up in some scenarios, you think?
Yeah. Look, if you just be have real conviction about fixing a certain thing and making that thing great and then moving, having a whole load of jack of all trades, master of none, and adding more trades to it, in my opinion, in my experience, rarely generates growth.
Yeah. Okay. What about for founders that are just at the startup stage or investors? What do they get wrong about PropTech?
What do founders or investors get wrong about prop tech? I think they probably underestimate how pragmatic agents are. Agents don't necessarily always want shiny toys. They want demonstrable value. Quite often these prop techs that are pitching to agents fail to understand that they're not in the top 100 things that that agent is thinking about that day in terms of running their business and what's important to keep the lights on and keep growing, particularly at the SME end. They want tools that can save them time, reduce admin, help them win more instructions, help them grow. And if you can't show that really, really clearly, you won't cut through. So the pragmatism of this market is often underestimated, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree. What's a KPI that everyone obsesses over that you think is overrated?
A KPI everyone obsesses over that you think overrated. Okay, I'm a bit of a KPI junkie,
Okay.
uh, but I mean, there's horses for courses, right? Daily active users gets airtime, but it can be massively misleading unless you really understand that job of work and how it applies to what we call an ICP, so an ideal customer profile. Customers can be in your system all day, every day, but if they're not actually achieving the outcomes, that's not success. What matters in that example is depth of usage. Are they completing the workflows that matter most to them? And are you reducing the friction around that? If you answer that question, you'll do a lot better than patting yourself on the back over a vanity metric such as DAO or MAU,
Yeah.
daily or monthly active users, in my opinion.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, nice. Let's go into a bit of a quick fire round. So I'll try not to ask further questions off the back of it. I'll just take it at face value.
Okay.
So what's a book or a podcast that's really shaped how you lead?
Book or a podcast that's really shaped how I lead? Quick fire. The Hard Thing About Hard Things is really great by Ben Horowitz. If you've not read that, that's like slightly different to a lot of the sort of leadership books. You know, it's pretty raw, it's honest. Leadership can be quite tough and it quite be lonely. And if you've ever felt like that, that's a really good book to give you some perspective.
Okay. Favorite sales, marketing, or founder tool that you can't live without?
Oh, I mean, there's a whole bunch of AI tools at the minute that we're constantly trying out. I'd be in a mess without Slack. It's not that glamorous, but you know, a lot of culture day to day in businesses nowadays that are a bit more distributed lives on Slack. So yeah, I wouldn't like to see it go away.
Yeah. Okay. What's an underrated go-to-market channel that more founders should be exploring?
Partnerships. You know, we sort of touched on this, but in prop tech especially, agents don't want disconnected systems. You know, they want an ecosystem.
Mhm.
The right partnership can transform reach and stickiness. And quite often, when you get partners sort of bundling their go-to-market together, you can make them better than the sum of their parts. So it's not just about any old partnerships,
Yeah.
but if you can find the right strategic fit where your ICP matches, partnerships can be a great distribution channel.
Okay. Founder or business leader you really admire?
A founder or business leader that I really admire. Uh, Look, I mean, you know, you give the obvious answers. You know, Satya Nadella's done an amazing job around um, culture and obviously what they've done with cloud and all that good stuff at Microsoft, but it's a bit obvious. I think the most important thing in leadership, it's definitely not about who you admire from a distance, but it's whether people closest to you actually trust and believe in you. You know, we're always reading about tech giants or celebrity CEOs or whatever, but admiration doesn't always mean effectiveness, right? The leaders I admire most are the ones who like build belief inside their own organizations. Their teams not only know the strategy really deeply, but they feel real ownership of it. And they also, off the back of that, trust that when something's promised, it'll be delivered. And you see this in organizations. Ones where you've got 100 or 200 people, but every single person in that organization, if they have a summer party or an all hands or something that's culturally significant, you know, and it's not all in the same wording where they've had a PR guy write it for them, but they're all posting about it on LinkedIn. They're proud of where they work and they're proud of the leaders that represent them. So look, to answer that question directly, I know this was supposed to be quick fire, so sorry, but I admire any leader who has that effect on their people because trust compounds, and in the end, that's what makes businesses succeed, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, very good answer. Yeah, not quick fire, but yeah, I like it.
Sorry about that.
Oh, so good. Where should people go to connect with you?
LinkedIn, I share regularly on there, and I'm always open to connecting. Or you can find more about Alto, obviously, at our website, which is altosoftware.co.
Okay, cool. And yeah, any estate agents reaching out to Alto right now? Anyone else that should be reaching out?
Anyone who wants to partner with us, obviously prospects, people moving from existing CRMs. We pretty much 80% of all startup agents in the UK use us. So if you are thinking of starting up your own estate agency business, give us a call. We can talk to you about how we can support you in doing that. But anyone really, we're very approachable.
Nice. Okay, perfect. Well, that's the pod. Thanks for coming on, Rick.
Cheers. Thanks for having me, Cole, Matt. Really appreciate it.